Yeah, I think there's just one for the record thing that I was going to mention on this. I thought I had something else, but I'm not going to mention the pound difference of what we said of Tim Allen's Coke thing. I'm not going to get that's not really.
I think the way I said it too was not necessarily definitive.
That's kind of
Yeah, I know exactly how much cocaine the man had on him.
yeah.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, and I may be a simple traveler passing through, but I'm still just happy to be here.
I love when you're just happy to be here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm co-host Jeremy, and I was the traveler passing through Meijer, grabbing the last of the pumpkin spice cookies.
What's Meyer?
R.I.P.
Oh, Meijer is our regional grocery chain store here for those not in the Midwest.
And you were grabbing up the last of the Halloween goodies.
Yeah, pumpkin spice cookies.
Yeah, I had a couple. Are those ones the ones you baked?
Yeah,
Pretty good,
thank you.
gotta say.
I'm a bit of a baker.
The Halloween spirit lives on in the Ruggles household.
That's true. I just lit my pumpkin candle before we started. Still have my Halloween decorations up. I don't give a damn.
Well,
This is even better seeing as how it's like mid-November when people are hearing this. Sounds even more egregious.
Oh, they'll still be up then.
When do
He's
you plan on taking them down? Like, never? Do you just kind of put blankets over your Halloween decorations until you can unveil them again next year?
Nope. Just gonna put Santa hats on top of the things with heads.
Well, no one can argue that you're not at least efficient.
we're going to have to start thinking about our Christmas episode soon enough. But in the meantime, I am.
Wait, you guys don't
co-host-
have your Christmas record picked out? Because I already do.
No.
Wow. You so rudely interrupted co-host Peter.
Did I derail? Was that bad?
I really wanted to linger on that point, Sean.
Yeah, I thought so. That's why I jumped in. I had to save it.
Yeah, every year I scramble to find a Christmas record to feature because I don't really have any. So Sean, meanwhile, just buys them up all year long.
Yeah, big fan.
Okay, let's try this again. I am co-host Peter Cook, and fun fact, I was born about 40 miles away from where the artist that we are featuring today was born.
I was wondering that when I was doing my research.
Yeah.
Now I know. 40 miles.
Yeah.
Less than an hour.
Yeah. It's about like a 45-minute drive.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what a pleasant drive it would be without billboards on the highway.
Yeah, because it's in Vermont, so there
Yeah.
aren't billboards.
They don't have them. It's shockingly pleasant to drive through Vermont. Just looking at trees. Amazing. What a concept.
Nature. Well, who is this artist that was born in Vermont?
This artist that was born in Vermont that we will be covering today is Louis Collins, a New England area folk singer. I'm just gonna build the scene here as to why I picked this record this week. Peter and I are in the state of Michigan in the United States, and it's winter like 5 or 6 months here every year, and we are currently standing on the precipice of winter. You know, we've had some pretty nice days recently, but it's supposed to hit below freezing in the next week. And I hate winter. And this is like when I break out all my folky albums, my, Neil Young live albums and Leonard Cohen and Karen Dalton and all the depressing folky stuff. And this feels right in that hall of folky albums that I want to hear this time of year.
The soundtrack to seasonal depression.
Yeah, to beat that winter depression, you listen to depressing music.
Though this album is not super depressing. It's got some sad ones in there, but it's also got some uppers.
Yeah. What are we starting with? Which vibe did you go for to kick things off?
Well, I thought it would be appropriate to start with Awaiting the Snow,
Oh,
because that's what we're doing, see?
you're going full theme with this.
Oh, yeah. You think I just make this stuff up off the dome every week? This is pre-planned, baby.
No, I've heard your exclusive monthly mixes that we'll talk about later. You are always conceptual.
I'm highly conceptual, if nothing else. All right, side B, track 5, Awaiting the Snow, Louis Collins, from her album Baptism of Fire.
The year?
1981.
80s folk. Awesome. Let's get into it.
Late afternoon, the sky's growing darker, gray clouds have threatened all day. The wind whistles against my windows, the rhododendrons shiver and sway. They say that the snowstorm, so absent all winter, will finally lay its thick blanket o'er all. So I've built up the fire, brought in extra coal. Now I drink the stove's warmth, listen to the wind howl. But where is the blizzard so long expected? I'm hung in suspension, awaiting the snow. I sit by the fire, a bag of emotions, ragged and torn from weeks gone by, needing some comfort, no one to talk to. The radio keeps me alive as I wait for the wind to blow away madness. I wait for the snow to bury my grief. I wait for its blanket to wrap round my sadness. It's quiet to bring me relief.
Yeah, I got that minor key melody, wintry imagery. It's the less dark version of Bob Dylan's The Ballad of Hollis Brown,
True.
which that one gets a little intense. But this one, yeah, a mood setter for sure.
Yeah.
If you want to be in that mood.
I don't get a choice. It just happens. It happens to me.
Yeah.
So this album is like a form of radical acceptance for you?
Yeah, we'll go with that. I will say this is not like a long time album in my arsenal. This is something I picked up leading up to this season, trying to build up. That's how I operate. I build up a little catalog.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you haven't actually. This will be its maiden voyage this
is
winter.
Maiden voyage in my seasonal depression, yes. But the cover is what first intrigued me. It's kind of got like a Firebird thing going on. It's called Baptism of Fire. And the artist was Louis Collins, Lui. And I was just like, whoa, this looks hard.
You thought it was going to be some dark, like doom metal?
I thought it would be like edgy or heavy in some manner. And it was not that. It
Yeah.
was folk music. but it turned out it was very good folk music. Louie's a fantastic singer, as I'm sure you may have noted and will further note as we work through the songs here.
Yeah, from what I heard, there's a pretty good variety of atmospheres, vibes present throughout this record. It's not, I mean, we kind of addressed that already. It's not all like what we just heard.
No, and I don't get the impression it's like conceptual at all, really. The songs don't seem to be like around a certain theme.
No, we discussed a little bit beforehand that it doesn't even really seem like much thought was put into the track sequencing.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, I'm not sure that, there's any intention there. Just kind of capturing songs she made because she's not like a pop artist. She was not at this time and was not really at any point in her career. So there's not that kind of like manufacturing of, a product.
Yeah, I didn't see what label this is on, but it's not a major label, right?
No, it's Philo Records. Have you heard of that?
No. Man, is there someone of note on that label?
So I'll just give the little spiel on Philo now instead of later like I planned. But they were founded in 1973 in North Ferrisburg, Vermont, where they converted a dairy barn into a studio.
That sounds like some Vermont shit.
Yeah. And their kind of ethos was letting artists make all the calls as far as producing things, which songs to do. They just trusted the artists to do that. And they also didn't, they recorded artists who they thought were making good music, not who had built up an audience in the area or who they thought might have commercial potential.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very, idealistic label, I'd say.
Yeah, and they were doing this in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they put out records by Utah Phillips, who I love, Dave Van Ronk, Nancy Griffith, Ray Wiley Hubbard, and Rosalie Sorrells, along with a bunch of others.
Those are some noteworthy names, though.
Yeah.
Folk singers.
Yeah.
It looks like they were purchased by Rounder Records a year after this album came out in 82, so going
Correct.
deep on the folk music connections there.
Yeah, they had a few of the distributors went out of business that year, and also with the changeover to CDs, they didn't have a way to have CDs made, so they sold to Rounder Records in 82. But let's talk about the artists themselves. Louie Collins, who was born a mere 40 miles from Peter Cook, our co-host, in Barr, Vermont in 1950.
30 years before I was born. 40 miles in 30 years.
Not so far to travel, especially when there's no billboards.
Exactly.
I couldn't find much about her early life. All this information I cobbled together from various interviews I was able to find, which there's not a ton, and there's not a ton of centralized information anywhere. But
Yeah, there's a small Wikipedia article, correct?
yeah, it's like a 1-paragraph Wikipedia thing.
Yeah.
But even her bio on her website and stuff, I just felt like there are pieces everywhere and not the whole picture anywhere. But not much on her early life. She attended the University of Connecticut, initially studying classical music, and decided to switch over to sociology. And that's when she started writing her own songs. Before that, she was performing around town, but doing covers of a lot of the 60s artists, Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez.
That seems to be often the folk singer story is, I learned these songs, especially in that time period, people who were late 60s, early 70s going to college. I kind of learned these songs as a teenager. Then I went to college and started learning more about the world and began writing my own songs.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems to be what happened here.
Yeah.
Though I was a little surprised. It wasn't until she stopped studying classical music that she decided to start writing songs. That was interesting. After she gets out of college, she began touring the New England folk club scene. It was apparently pretty thriving in that era. Boston was kind of a hot spot outside of New York as far as the folk music scene. She toured through the mid-70s and released her first album, Made in New England, in 1978 on Philo Records.
Some real regional pride.
Yeah, and I hadn't heard of Louis Collins before picking up this album, and it seems like she's seen as like a crown jewel in that area in the folk scene, but is not like well known outside of it.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot going on there. And even some of the artists you mentioned, like Dave Van Ronk, I'd say he was huge in the Greenwich Village scene in New York. And I think most people just know his name in his connection with Dylan now.
Yeah. From like making one like comment on a Bob Dylan documentary.
Yeah, about Dylan stealing House of the Rising Sun from him, and then the animals stealing it from Dylan, or that whole comment.
Yeah. I want to play another song now before we keep ripping in here. I'm going to play the song I liked most on this album, The Tinker's Coin.
All right. Where does that fall on the LP?
That would fall on side A, track 4, Peter.
Fantastic.
Come all you lads and lasses near, a story I will tell to you about a cold damp night like this, when shelter I was seeking, a traveler passing through. The barkeep said to guard my coin, to stay away from Miss Tinker, but that just brought me near to here, for not had I worth taking, a traveler passing through. He bought me a glass of darkened stout, to thank me for my company, and dropped a penny in the glass, for the luck that it would bring to me, a traveler passing through. The poor have but their pennies left, the king his Saxon shilling, the king will never part with his, I part with mine most willing, to a traveler passing through.
Now, while that beautiful song was playing, co-host Peter was knocking me around over here, saying, "This sounds like Ren Fair music, Jer." Doing a little browbeating.
Yeah, I've been planning to say that ever since I first listened to this album.
Oh my gosh.
And then you picked this one. I wasn't sure.
I know she says shillings in it and Saxon, but it comes off to me more like English folk, like Richard and Linda Thompson stuff that I really do like.
Two artists that are like very Ren Fair music adjacent.
When they're not that.
It sounds like I'm just hearing a lot of excuses from you, Jeremy. It sounds like someone might be in a little bit of Ren Fair denial.
Okay, to be fairs, there wasn't a lot of throwback instrumentation in there. There wasn't hurdy-gurdy.
I don't know. It didn't feel melodically much like Ren Fair to me either. Like a little bit, but
It's
not.
a little traditional British folk.
Yeah.
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 Didn't get into like Celtic vibes as much, you're saying, or
There's a tinge of that.
or more of the medieval folk rock.
Yeah.
With prog leanings. I think that's what really gets you is the stuff that like is anachronistic, that sounds like electrified traditional. That seems to really
That might be it, because I like music like this quite a bit. There's a show I used to listen to that's no longer being aired, Shrunken Planet, that he mixes in a lot of music that sounds like this, like real mellow, folky, kind of hypnotic sounds. So go find the old episodes of Shrunken Planet if you like this.
This was my favorite song on the album.
Same.
It's great.
Yeah, it jumped out to me pretty quickly as a top song right away too.
Is this an original? Are they all originals?
They're it's like half and half.
Okay.
This one was written by Jack Hardy, who is a folk singer in that area in that time. She covered, like, Julie Snow did the song Baptism of Fire that the album is named after. She was apparently good friends with Julie Snow.
Yeah, it's common that folk singers will cover their contemporaries.
Yeah. Yeah, and she does, like, Greg Brown,
Mm-hmm.
who is a folk singer of that time.
Fantastic, yeah.
He has some really good songs. And Stan Rogers, who's also a super good folk.
Yeah, that's a name I recognize, but I can't place. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So she's not covering big hits. It's, yeah, like you said, more her contemporaries, some like people who are friends of hers.
Mm-hmm. Probably, a little circuit, the folk circuit of the late 70s into the 80s. It's a small but tight-knit circle.
Yeah, I stumbled upon some type of like exhibit going on of someone showing artifacts from the 80s folk revival in that area, in the New England area. And that kind of confused me because I don't know of any 80s folk revival. But maybe it was more of a regional thing. I feel like the 80s was a time when it was deeply uncool to be folk, like in the pop world and like the national spectrum in America. Folk was not a thing going on.
Mm-hmm. Like we've previously talked about the Roaches, and yeah, they were on a major label, but even they really struggled for big time success.
Yeah.
Recognition.
Yeah, and like when I think of it, like Tracy Chapman, I guess, or Suzanne Vega.
Yeah, more like mid to late 80s.
Yeah, those are later on. Like at this time, New Wave is starting to happen. Disco just happened. I don't know. I feel like folk was way out of favor, so.
Yeah, it's about 10 years past its time in the pop world.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of the Reagan era, I don't usually think of folk music.
No. Nope, but they were underground, cranking away good-ass tunes in New England still. But there's aspects of the production going on that, like, hint at the 80s, and it's very, like, crisp and clean. It's not like that trying to sound raw and authentic kind of thing that I feel like former folk artists tried to capture. So it kind of moves into new ground a little bit in my mind for its era. Later on that would become kind of a norm, like super clean, minimalist folk kind of sound, but I can't think of things from that era that match how this sounds.
It's interesting thinking about really, folk music in the pop world. as you mentioned, that later in the 80s, you get Suzanne Vega, Tracy Chapman. In the 90s, you get Jewel. That's, very clean. I feel like very packaged for mass audiences. But what was kind of on the other side of that around the same time? Beck.
Yeah.
It was very much, it was commercial, but it was much more raw.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have like the Elephant Six stuff going on in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's kind of like raw, maybe a little throwbacky. But yeah, 80s. Weird time for folk. Actually, I stumbled on some article that was like a history of folk, and they're like describing artists up and through about Nick Drake. And then it says in the article, skipping ahead to the 90s, parentheses, 80s folks sucked. And then that's all it had to say about the whole decade of the 80s.
Wow.
Folk music.
Really in-depth commentary.
Yeah. Disappointing article. Don't look it up. Well, let me touch on some of the players. I think this is her second album, I guess, to be clear. She put out her first one, Made in New England, in 78, and this is the second album in 81. Also on Philo Records before they would go out of business. But let me just name some of these players. On the tenor guitar, mandolin, and backing vox, you have Bill Lauf Jr.
Backing vox would be backing vocals.
Oh, yeah, I say vox always.
There's a vox organ and stuff like that, so just for our clarity for our listeners.
That's good job, Pete. Thank you. Bill Lauf was pretty interesting. Him and Horace Williams Jr., who also played on this album, played guitar, background singing, not vox. They did a couple tours where they walked like hundreds of miles with their instruments and would just like stop in at places, do a show, walk 20, 30 miles, play another show. And yeah, the first one they did, they trekked like 390 miles. And then they did one later where they ended in Greenwich Village, and it was like 410 miles or something they walked.
Wow.
Pretty wild. Like it feels kind of gimmicky, but also not.
Yeah. That's kind of my brain went to. Was that a sort of a bid for authenticity of like, yeah, we're out on the road, we're walking the road every inch of it.
Literally hoofing it.
Yeah.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground. You have also Gordon Johnson on this record playing the bass. He played with Paul Winter.
Recently featured.
And
I'd buy that for $1.
On I'd Buy That for $1. Played with Greg Brown, who we mentioned. Chuck Mangione. I played with a couple other like big jazz names, and you can hear it on this album when there is bass in the songs. It's like kind of jazzy. Personally, I kind of hate the tone of the bass. It's like super, super clean and high-endy, which is not my vibe when I want to hear bass guitar, but
well, the jazz records he played on are not well remembered, I will say that. So he was going for a style of music that is pretty dated at this point.
Yeah, but his playing was phenomenal throughout the record. I will say that to his credit. You got Victor Stephans on drums. He would later become an engineer and producer himself with the Horizon Music Group. You got David Darling on the cello. He was a pretty big name who also played with Paul Winter.
Yeah, he's one of the longest running Paul Winter sidemen. He's on a bunch of records with him.
Yeah, and he went on to play with the Nashville Symphony Orchestra and did a bunch of albums in his own right. Very talented cellist. You got Ted Moore on percussion, also played with Paul Winter. Seeing a little theme here.
Yeah, starting to detect a theme.
And then Sean Herman played harp, and I couldn't find anything about Sean Herman, the harpist.
Probably played with Paul Winter, though.
Odds are Paul Winter alumni. So those are the players. After this album, Louis put out There's a Light in 1985 and then retired from music in 1986. That stuck for about 7 years. I'm pretty sure she had a child in 1985. But it's also, I just heard it mentioned in passing by her in an interview because there's not really personal details about her out there on the internet.
But that's pretty good deductive reasoning.
Yeah. So she retired and then unretired sometime in the early 90s and has put out 6 more albums since then. She's still playing live here and there. It looked like she played just this past summer at one point. She's been teaching music to children as her part of her gigs she's doing out there. And at some point in the 90s picked up banjo and got into like clawhammer banjo and is playing uke a little now as well. So she's still learning instruments, still putting out music, still teaching the kids how to do it, still out there doing her thing.
Now on TikTok showing the kids how to play banjo.
I hope so. I don't have TikTok, so can't check. But
couldn't do that kind of research.
I didn't do that kind of research. Maybe it's time I get TikTok.
Yeah, you can find out what people are doing with the bottoms of pumpkins on there too. Like you were so angry about.
Oh, don't! Why would you bring up the pumpkins?
I'm sorry. To me, it was amusing, but it was different for you.
That's true. All right, I'm gonna play another song now.
What you got?
We're gonna play January Thaw. This is wow. Peter almost did a spit take.
That was very close to a spit take. Just the. Thematically, you're leaning into it.
Yeah, I don't mess around. But this is one of Louis' songs that she wrote. We're talking side B, track 2, January Thaw.
Stormy weather drove me here, drop anchor fast and haul up tight. In solitary harbor, fill the cracks and mend the lines. To spend the long cold winter with the decks not rolling under me. When land legs aren't too steady, but they'll strengthen given time. So give me time, don't shine your sun so warm, so full of fascination. Give me time, don't tempt me to go rushing off to sea. November snow lies on the ground. Are you a January thaw? Come to promise springtime and deceive my fragile heart. Each one offered sailing fine. I braved the challenge every time. Brisk winds filled my sails, a dazzling sun did warm my bones. But winter follows summer, now I'm needing time to be alone. Sheltered on the land, for here it was that I was born. So give me time, don't shine your sun so warm, so full of fascination. Give me time, don't tempt me to go rushing off to sea. November snow lies on the ground. Are you a January thaw? Come to promise springtime and deceive my fragile heart. Part of me wants summer now, but part of me still knows time one spends in solitude is time one needs to grow. And winter months teach patience, harbor bound until the spring.
More like May thaw here in Michigan, right, guys?
Yeah. That's true. Be nice to have things thaw in January.
Yeah, thaw out for my birthday, maybe. No such luck.
No such luck. Yeah.
We'll see. Climate change might be nice to us.
Okay. Is there a climate change theme song on this album? I don't think that it was really in the vocabulary at this point.
No.
But yeah, that's I almost feel like the instrumentation, like the bass, the drums, almost felt like they were going in a different direction than the song itself.
Yeah, and that song shifts a few times in the song. Like, I don't know if it's a rhythmic shift or just the parts, but yeah, it feels like things keep kind of shifting around.
Yeah. It almost felt like King Crimson like crept in on that track or something. It's like they were supposed to be at a Roaches session, but
Robert Fripp snuck into the dairy barn.
or Tony Levin on the bass.
Yeah. That's all I got on Louis' life. Sean, do you have any recommended albums?
I mean, kind of.
Kind of.
I I had to call in some assistance from the other two co-hosts today because 80s folk is definitely not in my wheelhouse. I don't really collect anything similar to this, so I don't have any like good personal recommendations. However, I went back through the I'd Buy That for $1 catalog and picked out 4 records that we've talked about before that I think are similar. So if you're a new listener and you enjoyed this and want something similar, why not check out the Frank Folk Singer episode?
Yeah.
Album came out in 85. Another Jeremy pick. Some similarities in that 80s folk interpretations. Next one, The Roaches, self-titled from 79.
One of Jeremy's favorite records we've ever done.
True. A theme. Chris Williamson, The Changer and the Changed from 75.
Yeah, that came to mind when I was listening to this.
Yeah, definitely some similarities.
Also a Jeremy pick.
And last one, Janice Ian, Between the Lines from 1975.
I don't think I picked that one.
That was me.
Oh,
That was a
you.
Peter
Okay.
pick.
Yep.
Early one of the early episodes.
Yeah, I had a couple folk picks early on. I also did the Melanie Gather Me album very early on this podcast.
True.
And on our Patreon, one of our tiers, our $10 tier on the Patreon, which you can check out over at patreon.com/I'd Buy That Podcast. Each of us co-hosts rotate monthly, making a mix related to the episodes, the albums that we feature from that month. And for the November exclusive monthly mix, I put a song by Melanie on there. It was from her 1970 album, Candles in the Rain, which I put it's interesting because I put the title track, Candles in the Rain, which is followed by Lay Down, subtitle, Candles in the Rain.
Whoa.
She really leans into that Candles in the Rain on that album. So I put that on there. That's from 1970. I also put a song from the Roaches' second album, Nerds, from 1980 on there. And the Roaches, they were New England as well. They would have, right around the same time. And, of course, they were on Warner Brothers and working with King Crimson, as we mentioned. But yeah, so put a Roaches song on there. And Kate and Anna McGarrigle, I put a track by them. Actually, I did their version of Swimming Song by Loudon Wainwright III, which I think on my last mix, I had put his version on there. But theirs is more like a fall sounding, like an autumnal sounding version of that song.
Oh, I haven't heard that yet, and I love that song.
I think we're going to have to do that self-titled Kate and Anna McGarrigle album from 76 sooner or later, because it'll be right up your alley, Jeremy.
All right. I'll add it to my pile of records over here.
So yeah, once again, you can, if you're not already signed up for our Patreon, check out patreon.com/I'd Buy That Podcast. At the $1 tier, you get the early access. You get episodes in advance. At the $5 tier, you also get bonus episodes that we record on 45s. At the $10 tier, you'll also get exclusive monthly mixes. And I believe our $20 tier is currently full, but that is
It is.
Yeah, that's the vinyl subscription where each month co-host Sean sends some records your way along with a handwritten note. So if you go on there and you can look for an opening at some point, just every day check patreon.com/I'd Buy That podcast and see if there's an opening on the vinyl tier.
Yeah, our $20 tier is getting competitive.
Yeah.
That's we'll call that success.
Yes, I would call that success.
I have one other album I want to recommend. I mentioned earlier Suzanne Vega, her self-titled album from 1985, I feel like is in this vein.
Mm-hmm.
Some of her later work. This album doesn't have the Tom Steiner song on it, which I am grateful for personally. Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
But this album is also, I feel like there's more folkness to it. I feel like more popness kind of crept in to her music over time, but this one's good and folky, and go check it out. Suzanne Vega, self-titled, 1985.
Yeah, there's other artists, of course, I don't think you're ever going to find her stuff cheap, but Sinead O'Connor was...
Oh, yeah. You can find her first album cheaper, but yeah.
There's Bruce Coburn. There's some other 80s folk artists out there. I really hope we can find more records like this from regional scenes, which I'm sure can sometimes really, the availability to find this stuff can really depend on where you live.
Yeah. Yep.
Where did you find this one, Jeremy?
Well, I got this one from DJ Hard Bargain on Discogs.
After Sean moved out east, nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah, so that makes sense. He probably picked it up out there in Philly and probably made its way down from...
Out here a little closer to Vermont.
Yeah.
Very cool. DJ Hard Bargain, bringing the hits.
On Discogs.
Well, before we get out of here, I did want to do a quick installment of For the Record, where we set the record straight on misinformation stated on previous episodes of the podcast. And this one is from our Ventures Rock and Roll Forever episode. On that, we stated that the original version of You Can't Sit Down was released by Phil Upchurch. It was originally recorded in 1959 as Can't Sit Down by the Bim Bam Boos, featuring Phil Upchurch on guitar and Cornell Muldrow on organ. Phil Upchurch's version was recorded in 1960 and released in 1961 with both Upchurch and Muldrow performing on that version as well. So just a quick little For the Record. I know we got into a little debate about that song on that episode. So
right. We care about the facts here.
Nothing but the facts.
Nothing but the facts.
And with that, do we have any final thoughts on Louis Collins?
No, I'm ready to chomp down some more pumpkin spice cookies.
Well, what song did you want to leave us with today?
I'll leave us with Second Effort. Also, this one was like up there fighting for my favorite song on the album with Tinker's Coin.
And this is an original by Louis Collins?
This one is not an original. This one is the Stan Rogers song featured.
Okay.
Who Stan Rogers at one point said that Louis sings his songs better than he ever could. So here's Louis singing one of his songs. Talking side B, track 4. Thank you for listening. I'm co-host Jeremy.
I'm co-host Peter.
And I'm co-host Sean.
I've been sitting here crying since long before the day began. My pockets full of nothing but broken dreams, my head in my empty hands. The winnings that I thought I had and come so far to get, further away than they've ever been. They've been taken by another man. and their joy for the hometown boy who went away to make it good. Well, I bet they cleared away the party so my mom can dance me in the door. And the old man can wink and pour me a drink, ask me what the tears are for. It's harder to try again than it was to begin. A man can play a lone hand in a high-stakes game. It doesn't mean he's gonna win. Somehow I've got to keep from getting further down. Or I buy myself a bottle of cheap escape and a ticket to another